5 archaeological discoveries that were made by pure chance. Number 5. Herculaneum. Most people are familiar with the destruction of Pompeii, which occurred in AD 79. After all, it's now one of the biggest tourist attractions in Italy and draws thousands of tourists each year. However, a significantly smaller number of people are aware that the day Mount Vesuvius erupted, it also destroyed another Roman city called Herculaneum. On the day of the eruption, Pompeii was downwind from the volcano and was thus quickly buried under a covering of ash. Herculaneum, on the other hand, was upwind and was destroyed more than 12 hours later when it was hit by a blast of scorching ash, rock, and volcanic gas. The blast was of such high temperature that it instantly carbonized everything in the city, leaving Herculaneum extremely well preserved. While the city of Herculaneum was never quite lost or forgotten, it nevertheless wasn't until the 18th century that it was rediscovered completely by accident. In 1709, a farmer was digging a well and found some elaborate marble stonework. It was later realized that he had actually discovered the remains of the magnificent Roman theater of Herculaneum, which had been lying undisturbed beneath his fields for over 1,000 years. After the initial accidental discovery, a series of robber shafts and tunnels were dug to strip the site of any valuable items. Not long after, however, Herculaneum was explored on a more scientific basis for King Charles of Bourbon. In the 20th century, archaeological excavations recommenced on a far more modern and scientific basis, which resulted in the discovery of more interesting Roman artifacts. Number 4. The Edinburgh Vaults. In 1785, the construction of the Edinburgh Vaults commenced under the South Bridge in Edinburgh, Scotland, and was completed and opened in 1788. The South Bridge's surface was thus dotted with numerous booming businesses with their workshops located underneath them. While still below this, living quarters existed. The lower you were under the bridge, the lower your social status was. Life under the bridge was in constant motion and development. Criminals moved illegal materials through the tunnels in a black market, a red light district with gambling venues cropped up, pubs and brothels were established, and crime and murder prospered. It is even said that at one point, serial killers were able to murder over a dozen victims and store the bodies in the vaults without being detected or stopped. However, the conditions in the vaults were so bad that even the poorest citizens were leaving their underground slums between 1835 and 1875. The vaults were eventually shut down and forgotten. In the 1980s, a rugby player and bar owner named Nori Rowan tried to help his Romanian colleague Cristian Raducanu escape the Romanian secret police and discovered a tunnel underneath his bar that led to the Edinburgh Vaults. The find led to Raducanu's successful escape as well as the vaults' revival. The tunnels and chambers were excavated and restored. When children's toys, medicine, and other household items were discovered, it was realized that the Edinburgh Vaults were home to many unfortunates. Today, the vaults are a major tourist attraction for those seeking the thrill of ghost tours. Number 3. The Venus de Milo. The famous sculpture of Venus de Milo was discovered in 1920 by a farmer named Georgios Kentritas on the Aegean island of Melos. Kentritas was in the process of plowing a field when he came upon a cave which contained within it half of a statue of the goddess Aphrodite. The events that followed are not quite clear, and different sources provide slightly different accounts of what happened next. Some sources claim that Kentritas hid the statue in a barn, wishing to keep it for himself. But the statue was eventually discovered and confiscated by Turkish authorities. Shortly after, the French ambassador to Turkey bought it and presented it to King Louis XVIII of France, who placed it in the Louvre, where it remains to this day. Other sources claim that a French officer named Olivier Vaudier was visiting Melos at the time when Kentritas found the statue and urged him to look for the other half of it. Kentritas obliged and soon discovered the other half, along with a 6th century BC statue of young Hermes and Hercules as an old man. Vaudier made a sketch of the statue of Aphrodite and sent it to Louis Brest, the French vice-consul for Melos, who in turn sent it to the French consul in Constantinople. The latter decided to obtain the statue of Aphrodite for France and sent an envoy to Melos. In the meantime, however, Kentrites sold the statue to another man on behalf of the Prince of Moldavia. The statue was ready to be placed aboard the ship for Romania when the French ship sailed in. After some bargaining, the envoy and Louis Brest bought the statue as a gift for Louis XVIII. Venus de Milo then appeared in the Louvre on March 1, 1821. It's interesting to note that a pedestal, a piece of an upper left arm, and a left hand holding an apple were found along with the statue. However, it's not clear whether these fragments belonged to the Venus de Milo, and while attempts to create a design to replace the missing arms were made, it was eventually decided to leave the statue in the state it was in when it was accidentally found by the Greek farmer. Number 2. Chinese Mummy. In 2011 in Taizhou, a city located on the eastern coast of China's Jiangsu province, road workers were in the process of widening the road, which involved clearing the way by digging several feet into the ground. When the workers were digging about 2 meters below the surface, they struck a large, solid object. Realizing that the object they accidentally found might be of significant value, they contacted a team of archaeologists to excavate the area. The archaeologists then determined that the object was actually a tomb with a 3-layered coffin inside it. When the main coffin was opened, layers of silk and linen covered in brown liquid were noticed, but the biggest surprise still awaited. Beneath the linens and silks, they discovered the remains of a female body. The remains were so well preserved that the eyebrows, hair, and skin of the woman were still intact after more than 600 years. Number 1. Palatial Roman Villa. When the designer Luke Irwin and his wife decided to convert an old barn on their newly acquired property in England into a room for table tennis, they came upon a most extraordinary find: a palatial Roman villa just 18 meters from their front door. In an effort to put their table tennis room together, the Irwins hired electricians to lay cables for lights. The spectacular discovery almost wasn't made at all. The electricians initially suggested stringing up an overhead cable from the Irwins' house in order to supply the power to the barn, but thankfully, Irwin insisted on an underground cable being laid instead. The electricians gave in, and soon, the drilling process began. Just 46 centimeters below the surface, they hit a strange, hard layer. The layer consisted of pieces of mosaics. Irwin quickly sent a photograph of the mosaic to the council, and shortly after, archaeologists arrived at their house, ready to excavate the site. They found that the mosaic formed part of the floor of an elaborate and extremely well-preserved villa, which dates back from between AD 175 and 220. The dig also unearthed hundreds of oyster shells, high-status pottery, brooches, coins, and the bones of wild animals. Other finds included a Roman well and the stone coffin of a Roman child, which had been previously used as a flower bed. The site hadn't been touched since the villa collapsed more than 1,400 years ago. As a consequence, it has been unsurprisingly declared extremely important.